Hey guys, welcome to another Rewind review, and today we're going to be looking at 2022's Fantastic Beasts: Secrets of Dumbledore. The third edition to the Fantastic Beasts franchise was directed by David Yates and written by J.K. Rowling and Steve Kloves, and features a whole host of returning actors including Eddie Redmayne, Jude Law, Dan Fogler, Alison Sudol, Ezra Miller, Callum Turner, William Nadalam, alongside newcomers Jessica Williams, Richard Coyle, and Mads Mikkelsen taking over as Gellert Grindelwald. The Fantastic Beasts movies I've had a bit of a mixed reaction to over the years. I felt like the first one was definitely good, and I do think that it was a good addition to the Wizarding World franchise, but I felt that The Crimes of Grindelwald, the sequel, it just wasn't as good and I wasn't as satisfied with it. So if you want to get a more in-depth look at what I thought of those films, I'm really stumbling over my words here, go and check out my reviews. Both of those are up on the Rewinds channel under Fantastic Beasts and The Crimes of Grindelwald. And with those contrasting opinions that I had for those films, I wasn't sure where I was going to be with this new movie. It certainly looked like it was going to be interesting. There was a lot of new things that were brought into it. There was a lot of stuff that was going on behind the scenes. There was so many controversies that are going on in the real world, which I'm not going to be getting into that on here. I'm just going to be talking about the film. But there were definitely decisions that did sort of get me a bit worried about what was going on with where this franchise was going to go, especially when it comes to Johnny Depp as Grindelwald. I don't want to get too wrapped up in that. The only thing I will say is I was disappointed that that's what happened, and it was a story that was sort of ongoing, and I think that I would have liked to have seen Johnny continue with the role. But I'll get on to how I feel about the newcomer Mads Mikkelsen a little later on in the review. So one of the biggest changes that's happened with this movie is the addition of Steve Kloves, who, thank God, he's back. If you aren't aware of who he is the screenwriter for basically all the Harry Potter movies. He wasn't involved in any of the Fantastic Beasts films, and I think bringing him in was genuinely a really good decision. The Fantastic Beasts story and Dumbledore's story, they were both contrasting and they didn't quite knit together as well as they should have. This movie does shift the focus a little better, and it now sort of streamlines it a lot more to focus more solely on the Dumbledore storyline, which I think is a much better decision. So starting off with the returning cast for this movie, we've got Eddie Redmayne coming back as Newt Scamander once again. Technically he's the main protagonist of this film, but he's kind of not in a way. It's definitely a lot of shared screen time between him and Dumbledore. As I say, like the Fantastic Beasts, the Dumbledore story, they're both still at play here, so there is a little bit of a balancing act there, but it is done better, and I think where Newt fits into this is much more what he should have been in the second movie. And in terms of performance, I do think that this is definitely one of the better performances that Eddie Redmayne has given as Newt. We even get some really good sort of emotional scenes with him as well, and I'm not going to be getting into spoilers in this video. This one's going to be completely spoiler free. I will do a spoiler video, and that'll be going out in maybe 1 or 2 days from the time that this one's released. This movie also continues the Queenie and Jacob story as well, with Alison Sudol and Dan Fogler. Again, I'm not going to spoil this. I will say that this is definitely the direction that I was hoping that they were going to take, and I think that both actors really do absolutely knock it out of the park. I think Dan Fogler is still one of the best aspects of this franchise, and it is genuinely great seeing him coming back into this. But like the last movie, it does try to juggle quite a lot of different characters, all with their own arcs and stories, but the difference here, they are all working towards one story. They are all focused on one goal in this, and I feel like that definitely does help. And it's better that there are other characters who can come into this because they all have a role to play. I was a little let down with Theseus's character, who's Newt's brother, because I've no problem spoiling the last movie, so if you haven't seen Crimes of Grindelwald, I'm going to be getting into spoilers for that one. Okay, so one of the biggest parts of that movie is his relationship with Leta Lestrange, and rather sadly by the end of the movie she is killed off. So I was wondering if this movie was really going to deal with him or focus on him sort of trying to deal with that and come to terms with what happened, but outside of really like a couple of lines here and there, they don't really focus on it that much, and I think that they could have done something a bit with that. Again, there is a lot going on, so maybe it was a better decision for them not to have done that, but I would like it addressed a bit more in the future. Ezra Miller's back as Credence in this as well, and by the end of the last movie, one of the big things that we discover is that he is going to be a character called Aurelius Dumbledore. There was a lot of questions about what it was that they were going to be doing with him in this movie, whether they were going to say that Grindelwald was either telling the truth or whether he was lying, where credence really sort of fits into things. I am actually really satisfied with what they do with it. For some reason I didn't think where they were going to go, and I really liked what it was that they did, and I like the approach to it as well. I won't spoil it here, I'll leave that for the spoiler review, but all I'll say is this is definitely a better idea than I thought it was going to be. Richard Coyle makes his debut as Aberforth, who's Dumbledore's brother. I actually quite like his addition to this movie because it is very much focused on the Dumbledores, the Dumbledore family, the history, and I think having him in this movie definitely adds to that. And I think Richard Coyle is actually really good in this role, and I think his chemistry with Jude Law is really nice, and I think that he definitely does have some of the more emotional scenes of the movie, especially with Dumbledore. You also get the addition of Professor Eulalie Hicks, played by Jessica Williams. She's actually a really good addition to this movie. I didn't really know much about her going into this because the marketing wasn't really sort of showing her that much. We saw little glimpses of her. I didn't really know what role she was going to be playing in this. I really like her. I think she does have a really nice personality. I think that she definitely does lighten things up a bit, and I like that they do sort of pair her up a little bit with Jacob throughout this as well. They really do bounce off each other quite well, and I think that they do lighten up the movie a lot more, because Crimes of Grindelwald was definitely one of the darkest movies within the Wisdom Well franchise, so it was really nice having this one sort of pushing that to the side a bit and having this one be a little bit lighter. The movie definitely does still have its dark moments, because most of the Harry Potter movies definitely do sort of dabble in some of the darker elements of the Wisdom World, and I think that this does have some pretty dark moments at times, but overall I don't think that this is anywhere near as dark as the last film. Strangely, with all the returning characters that are coming into this, there are two people that are weirdly sort of absent. We barely see anything of Tina, played by Catherine Waterston, and we get nothing with Nagini, played by Claudia Kim. It is really odd that they set these characters up as something really big and then just completely ignore them for this one. But I think because the movie is so much, there is so much going on in this film that there were going to be some casualties in a way, and I think that they didn't really add much to what they could have been in this film. So I think they definitely made the best decision that they could, because this is Dumbledore's movie, and I think having him be the focus of this definitely does work better. And one of the biggest characters who's coming back into this is Jude Law as Albus Dumbledore. In the last movie we didn't see an awful lot of him because they kind of kept him out the way, and they sort of kept him within like the Hogwarts castle for most of the movie. So this time, with his name in the title, he is definitely a lot more in focus this time. Like, he is kind of the main protagonist of this movie. Like, it sort of bounces between him and Newt, as I've said. The movie starts and ends with him, and I think this is very much Dumbledore's movie throughout, and we finally get to see Jude Law like properly get into character for this one. This is definitely one of the best depictions of Dumbledore I've seen since the Harry Potter movies, and I really do like what they did with him. He's still wise, he's still got this mystique to him, and mystery, and this playfulness to him, but there's still a bit of naivety to him because he is still the young version of Dumbledore, and obviously that comes from his relationship with Grindelwald. And from that, there was one thing that I was wondering if they actually were going to ever actually address, and they do. I don't feel like this is a spoiler because I feel like this is something that's been publicised a lot. Many other reviewers have been talking about within their spoiler-free reviews, so I've got no problem saying it here. Dumbledore is now officially out and gay, and I think that they actually have managed to do it in actually quite a really nice way, because when it came to how they were portraying Dumbledore in some of the past movies, they did kind of skirt around it as much as they could, because if you're not aware of like the box office in a few different countries, then they wouldn't have been happy with it. So I think that they definitely did sort of cut things out. So it was really good that they actually just flat out went, look, this is the deal. I really do appreciate that they actually just went for it in this. And I think now that they have actually officially said this, that it has heightened a little bit of the tension between him and Grindelwald, because we didn't officially know what the connection between the two of them was. So having that now be properly confirmed, it was able to not only sort of establish where they were in the past, but it does set up how they will be in the future. I haven't talked about Grindelwald yet, have I? Okay. So in this movie, Grindelwald is played by Mads Mikkelsen. I've got to be honest, as soon as they said that he was going to be taken over as Grindelwald, I just went, great. Mads Mikkelsen is one of my favourite actors, and I think that he definitely gets this character. He is much better. I think this is the Grindelwald that we wanted to see the first time around. And just to reiterate what I said in the Crimes of Grindelwald review, Johnny Depp was good in the role, but I don't think that it was the right sort of fit for him. I don't think it was the right performance that he could have given for it. Mads Mikkelsen definitely does bring a lot more of what I wanted to see from Grindelwald into this movie. There are definitely elements of his Hannibal in this. He's got this quite seductive side to him, but he can also be quite menacing and threatening, and he's just so much better. I think that even like down to like the look of him as well, I think, like, because they got rid of that horrible blonde spiky hair that Johnny Depp had. It's all been changed. He definitely feels like a much more believable character within this world, and I think that he is definitely a lot more threatening. I think he has a better presence to him. One question that I know many people are going to have, and I know that some of you are going to ask, so do they actually address why he looks so different in this movie? No, they completely skim over it. They pull a roadie from Iron Man 2. Look, it's me, I'm here, deal with it. That's all they really sort of do. So, which I suppose makes sense. I think it would sort of complicate things a lot more than it really needed to be. So I do appreciate that they just went, look, this is the new Grindelwald and let's just go with it. And it definitely helps that we actually see him and Dumbledore actually interacting in this one, and we get to see what their connection is. And I think that the chemistry between them is genuinely really good. I like the tension between them, that there is a lot of history there, how they can't fight each other in any way, and I just think it is done really well, and I think Jude Law and Mads Mikkelsen are the best aspects of this movie. The story for this one I definitely wasn't really expecting, and it is a lot more politically focused than I thought it was going to be, because I'm not going to spoil too much here. It does involve a election, and there's a lot of background things that are going on, and I think it does work for this movie, but I think that it could have been just a little bit more interesting at times. But having said that, I do think that this definitely works a lot better as a standalone movie, because especially when it comes to the Fantastic Beasts and Dumbledore story, I think this definitely does find a really good bridge between those two stories. The Beasts does have an effect on Dumbledore, and I think that it is done a lot better, and I think that having Steve Kloves as a screenwriter has definitely improved that. It's not as twisty as the last movie was, but there are definitely a few things in here that you don't expect that they do really well, and I think that the twists are definitely sort of built up and handled a lot better in this one than they were in the previous film. And on top of that, it's actually a complete story this time. There is a beginning, a middle and an end, and I think that this is definitely what we needed to see. It does tell a better story, and I do like how it is more character focused, and they aren't just dumping exposition on you every 5 minutes. It definitely works better, and I do think that overall this is a much better film than what we had in the past. That being said, there are still 2 more movies to go at this point, so there are definitely things that do leave open that will be explored in the future, but I think overall this is a lot more of a proper story all on its own. I do think that is what they should have done in the Crimes of Grindelwald, because I'm not a huge fan of those stories that just sort of set up the next one. It can feel like a bit of a waste of time, because it just feels like, oh, I'm just sitting here for 2 hours watching an advert for the next movie. So it is good that this movie definitely does focus more on the here and now, and I think that that is definitely what they should have done in the last movie. This is much better. This is a big improvement, and I do think that there are aspects of this that fans are really going to enjoy. Continuing with the tradition of each movie being set in a different location, this movie takes place in Austria. I thought there was going to be a bit more of a time jump than there was in this one. I thought that this was going to like skip forward to like 1939. Again, there are reasons for that, and I think that if you have read The Philosopher's Stone or The Deathly Hallows, or familiar with the backstory with Dumbledore and Grindelwald, that might explain why. But for this movie, it takes place about a year or so after the first movie, so there hasn't been an awful lot of time between the events. The setting for this movie compared to Paris is actually a lot better. I feel like it does fit the story a lot more. I think that where they go with the story it definitely works better having Austria be like the main place that this movie's been, where it takes place, especially when you consider like they go into detail about it, and they go into the history of the Wizarding World, and there is a big reason why it needed to be this place, and I do think that it ties better into the story. Staying pretty consistent with the last few movies, I think the effects genuinely are really great in this film. I think what they've done here with, there's a lot bigger, more grander sets and set pieces that they genuinely do look really good, and I think that the effects genuinely have improved over these movies. It's sort of a given that the costumes are really good again. There isn't much of a difference between what everyone's wearing in this one than they were in the past two movies. I think the colours are definitely sort of toned down a little bit, but I think that they definitely do look good, and I do like how everyone sort of looks unique. But let's not forget, this is still a Fantastic Beasts movie, so there are quite a few creatures that are introduced throughout this film. We do get a few of the returning familiars, like the Niffler and the Bowtruckle, but we get a few new additions as well. I do think that they are placed in this movie really well. I do think that I don't want to get too spoilery again, I've said that way too many times now. There is definitely one creature that does have quite a big impact on this movie, a lot bigger than I thought. Very early on you do start thinking like, well, is this going somewhere? And then eventually it sort of makes more sense as the movie goes on, so I think that they definitely do integrate the beasts a lot better into this movie. Also, I think that there is a great sequence where a character's being taken into like this cave, and one of the main characters has to go and get him, and it is a really creepy and eerie scene. I think that the creatures that they do have in there are genuinely quite frightening, but they do provide some really funny scenes as well, because Newt gets to show off his little dance thing that he does and Eddie Redmayne definitely seems to be having an absolute blast with it, and I think that's why I genuinely do really like him in this role. But the creatures are used really well, and I do like the design of them. I think that they are both fantastic as well as quite threatening as well. I really like the creatures that they did include in this, and I like how they do fit into this as well. I haven't really talked about the visuals a lot in my reviews for these films, and so I'm going to sort of do that now. What David Yates has done with these movies is genuinely great, and I do like how he does direct these films. There have been moments in the past where I think that I didn't really understand the decision that they did. Like, there's a few like really close-up shots of like people's faces like looking at each other, and it's a bit uncomfortable. Maybe that's the idea. But with this one, they definitely sort of hold back on things like that. It is really well done. I think that it's edited a lot better. I think that visually it is genuinely stunning. There are some brilliant visuals in this. I think the scenery and everything, it just looks great. There's a lot more action in this movie as well, because the last movie is very dialogue heavy, so it is quite nice actually having them actually being out and doing stuff, and actually having a few more conflicts in this one. I do think the action is held really well, is handled really well. I think that what they do with like some of the spellcasting in this one is really unique. We haven't really seen some of these enchantments before. There's like some really great little moments here and there. There's somebody who gets like stuck in a wall at one point. It's visually very different, and I think that it's separated enough from what we've seen in the past to make us appreciate that they were trying something new in this one. That being said, there are a few sequences in this that don't really make a lot of sense, like logistically and physically. It's just I don't quite understand what it was that they were trying to do. I think that if you've seen the movie, then you're more than likely going to know which scenes I'm talking about, but for anyone who hasn't, all I'll say is it definitely takes a few elements from a certain other big screen sorcerer, and I don't think it fits too well in this movie. I like the moments and I like what it kind of represents, but I think it is a little odd, and I don't think it's really what they should have done. And not only does it look great, it sounds great as well, because we've got James Newton Howard coming back once again to do the score for this one, and he continues a lot of the themes that he had for the first two movies, so it genuinely sounds great. The soundtrack is really good for this movie. There is still that sort of haunting quality to it, but it sort of builds more on the epic side of things a bit more, and because of the action, there's a lot more action in this film. It really does build that up a lot more, and I think that the emotional scenes are definitely helped from the music a lot more. It is a really nice soundtrack, and we even get a little song from Gregory Porter as well during the credits, and it's just a really nice song, and I think that it really does work within this movie, and I really do like the song choice that they went with. I said a little earlier that this movie isn't as dark as the last film, and I do stand by that. I do think this is a lot lighter, but there are definitely moments that are quite dark, and I think that this can be quite bloody at times as well. Like, there is one scene that is quite shocking, especially for a 12A PG-13 movie, but it's not too excessive, so it is still a family movie, and I think the families will be able to watch this. But I do think that there are definitely a few moments here and there that I think younger viewers are definitely going to be not be able to cope with. I do think that there are going to be a few moments that I think younger viewers are definitely going to be a bit uncomfortable with. On top of that, we've actually got a lot more of an emotional story this time. I definitely found this one a lot more emotionally resonant for me as well. There's some really great moments that are built up over the course of this film, and I think that emotionally I do think that this one does pay off a few things that the previous films didn't really get a chance to do, and I do think that this one does have a few moments that will not necessarily make you cry, but I think that they will get you to choke up a little bit. I probably shouldn't be smiling because I'm talking about me getting choked up for these, because the emotional sequences are quite brutal, like, emotionally. Those sequences are handled really well, because one of the big things that I was quite surprised with this film is they do pay off a lot of different story plots and plot threads that have been going on throughout these movies. That's why I said that this does feel like a very complete film. There are a lot of endings in this in a way, and I think that they are done well. Even though there has been a bit of a rocky road trying to get up to these moments, I do think that ultimately where they've led up, I think, is going to be satisfying, but there is definitely room for them to go a bit further in the future. And again, I'm not getting into spoilers. One thing I will say is that where this sort of leaves off, there is definitely more movie in development, and I do think that they have set up enough for them to really sort of go forwards, but I don't really know what else they could really do. There's only really certain plot points that they can really sort of follow up, because a lot of things are sort of closed out within this one. I don't really know where the future is going to be for this franchise. I do feel like there could be just one more after this, but I don't know what the ultimate goal is for these movies. I'm interested to see where they do take the franchise from here, and hopefully it will be as good as this one. Overall, I think that this is definitely an improvement over the last film. I think that everything that was really good about the last movie, I think, is still good within this one. I think the casting's really good. I think the actors are great. The music, the effects, the costumes, everything about it is definitely better, and I think that the story is definitely a lot better as well. It is a lot more streamlined. I think it is easier to follow. It's not too twisty, it's not too convoluted, but there are still a few issues here and there, so there are definitely people who are going to really like this movie, but there are going to be a few people who don't. I think the families are definitely going to enjoy it, but I do think that if you've got any younger viewers who are just starting to get into Harry Potter, I do think that this might be a little bit too grown up for them at times, so caution advised. It is a 12 for a reason. The families that they can see it, I do think will enjoy it. I think fans of the franchise will be more than satisfied with this one. Hopefully. There will definitely be people who aren't happy with decisions that they've made and the direction that it's going in, so again, that's completely understandable. It's all subjective, just like every review that I do on here is subjective, and my opinion's not going to resonate with everybody, so I'd love to hear from you what you thought of the movie. But for me, I really like this movie. I think that this is definitely a step in the right direction for the franchise. I think it is better, it looks great, it sounds great, the effects are great, the actors, everything about it, but there are definitely issues that it can improve on, and hopefully will be improved on in the future. So for that reason, my rating for this movie is going to be 7 out of 10. Honestly, if you're a fan of the Wizarding World franchise, I do recommend checking this out if you can. If you're a casual moviegoer, I think that you will enjoy this. You can follow the story, but there are a lot of elements that I think you kind of need to know going into it, so it might be a little bit hard for you to get into. I've also got to say that, I will be doing a spoiler-filled video for this movie, and so it'll be going out within like a day or two after this is released. I will really go in depth on that. I don't know anyone who's actually done any spoiler videos at this point in time at recording. It's going to be interesting seeing what other people think of a lot of the big revelations and twists and things that are in this movie, so keep an eye out for that. So that's all I'm going to say for this one, and thank you so much, and I will see you in the spoiler review. See ya.